I got started collecting by being introduced to Looney Tunes animation, Walt Disney animation, and a number of animated cells from my business partner when we had our art gallery. And I thought it would be really cool to take a different spin on collecting animation by collecting black animation, because my background is in African American history. So I did some research to see if I could find any black animation from the cartoons from the 1970s. And I was introduced to Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids, and I was able to start purchasing cells and original production drawings from that cartoon. And then from there, I just started collecting everything that was related to the 1970s. I also have a number of original production cells and drawings from the cartoons from the 1970s. That would include the Jackson 5, Josie and the Pussycats, Rickety Rocket, the Harlem Globetrotters, Muhammad Ali, I Am the Greatest, and a number of other animated cartoons. The cartoons may not have been a spin-off from a movie or a comic book, but they were blaxploitation-esque, so to speak. For instance, like Rickety Rocket, which was a very obscure cartoon that didn't last very long. I think it was only out for one season or maybe 5 episodes the most. But it was very blaxploitation in its nature. You know, the big Afro puffs, you know, the characters that talked slang, but yet there was a message within the cartoon for young children. Another cartoon that you might consider to be blaxploitation-esque is Billy Joe Jive, where he was this, 13-year-old kid who was a detective, and his cohort was this young girl, and they went out and solved mysteries in their community. So there is a lot of overlapping, just as there is a lot of overlapping today with movies that go from comic books or comic books that are turned into movies. And as far as where this can go, I think this will live on forever in my mind, because we're coming up on the 40th anniversary of a lot of these films, the 40th anniversary of a lot of the cartoons. So you have, for instance, Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids. Next year will be the 40th anniversary for that. And although it will spark a lot of curiosity for those of us who remember the cartoons, I think once people get the word, or once the word is put out there about these cartoons and the anniversaries that are coming up, then this has the potential to go to a lot of different places. The 70s came around and I became a little older, and then these cartoons came out, and it was like, okay, it was okay to be black. It was okay to have relationships with people who didn't look like me. And these cartoons helped put things in perspective for me. And so therefore, I can only imagine that they put things in perspective for a whole generation of black children and white children. And that it was okay to, be friends with people who didn't look like you. That we all had the same problems, that we all had, the same needs and desires. And, these cartoons touched base on all of that. It was almost like a healing process for children. If you grew up in the 60s and you didn't understand what was going on, you had these cartoons to put everything in its perspective. So, the relationships became better, and it was just a time for, again, people to heal from what was and to go into the next step of what is it going to be about. And these cartoons really helped. They helped me. I looked forward to them. Saturday morning was like, there was nothing else to do but turn on the TV and watch the Jacksons sing, watch the Harlem Globetrotters play basketball, watch Schoolhouse Rock, Verb, to watch the Brown Hornet from the Cosby Kids cartoon. It was just fascinating. So it was like the best time to be a kid, in my opinion, to watch these type of cartoons. If you had difficulties understanding what was going on in the 60s coming into the 70s, it just put everything in its perspective. And these cartoons weren't just solely made for children of color, they were made for everyone, because within the cartoon themselves, the characters had white friends. They intermingled with people who spoke different languages. And it was awesome. So yeah, looking at these, looking back some 40 years later and reminiscing on these cartoons, it almost makes my heart heavy, because it was such a special time you know, as a child growing up in the 70s, looking at these cartoons and building relationships and understanding, you know, what was going on around me. The Museum of Uncut Funk is a true labor of love, and it is an idea that I came up with a couple of years ago about what to do with all of the stuff that we've collected. We've been very fortunate enough to have had the opportunity to exhibit our black animation collection in a museum in Pittsburgh called Toonsian, and was such a success that it ran 2 additional weeks for Black History Month. What I'd like to see happen with the collection in the Museum of Uncut Funk is that we could further the exhibition with black animation. We are currently working with an organization to help get the animation into various museums across the country.